what's the consensus for 2024? Are we doomed?
Whether or not we're doomed for 2024 I mean, there's a lot I can't predict. It has a lot to do with how the independent state legislator theory gets validated by the Supreme Court ruling on Harper v. Moore. I think there are some liberal and somewhat left-leaning Supreme Court analysts who are saying that from the deliberations that have taken place thus far, it seems like they're not going to get a verification of the most radical version of the independent state legislator theory, which would be great. Even then, it's really hard to say. The media landscape is obviously incredibly favorable to conservatives right now. What liberals need to understand is that it's not enough to be right. You have to be strong, too. I mean, Facebook is a right-wing boomer hellhole. YouTube prioritizes right-wing content searches. Twitter did before and now is owned by an openly far-right oligarch. Instagram is owned by Facebook. TikTok is owned by the Chinese government and censors like fat and queer people. So it's not, whether or not you're right is meaningless if you can't get the message out. So I guess we'll see how that plays out.
You think it was a matter of time? Did you think that the internet started kind of in a democratic way, but then the powers that be saw that this was going to be an issue and they just subsequently just took hold of every method of communication?
Yeah, well, money got involved. I mean, that's what happens. That's the issue down the line pretty much every time this comes up. But yeah, money got involved. When a new medium comes out, initially it's driven by the auteurs, the people who are just in it because they love it. People who will moderate an internet forum back in 1998 to nobody's benefit and possibly their own mental detriment, But now there's, trillions to be made. And invariably, because there is a bias towards conservatism for the capitalist, they will be, driven in that direction. I think, if anything, actually, because of the way demagoguery works these days, the internet actually has an even stronger bias towards far-right demagoguery because it's possible for, say, Elon Musk to be far more openly far-right than, like, the owner of a newspaper company could have 100 years ago. The system, it makes it easier for individuals to reach massive audiences. Money only amplifies that. So in a way, there's like a additional emboldening of those forces.
But there's some correlation between what happened in the Hearst days of the empire, where this newfangled medium of entertainment like radio and newspaper and stuff riled people up in this way, where like the internet kind of did that to rednecks. In 2015, that was like the last time that rednecks got their smartphone for the first time and started to participate in political discussions. And this, now people are just radicalized with conspiracy theories the same way that they were in the 20s by the same kind of Hearstian propaganda.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly old people getting a hold of social media that really like kicked it, because you can have your 70-year-old grandpas watching Fox News, or you can have them sitting at home with their phone, but fundamentally the content drip has the same flow to it. They already get out there and vote. They're a very active voting demographic because they don't have much else to do, so this only kind of cements some other trends. But yeah, I mean, inevitably, like, as long as money existed to be made, there was always going to be a bias towards this far-right demagoguery. And if the liberals want to, like, win, they have to realize they don't have any way to reach people these days, Like, seriously, almost all liberal or liberal-adjacent or even left-leaning messaging comes out of Hollywood. Artists just tend to be left-leaning for, a variety of reasons. So if you have TV shows, movies coming out that are generally progressive, that's great. But take a look at television news. Fox News is huge. Tucker Carlson is huge, far larger than their competitors. CNN recently had a CEO change and pledged to bring more right-wing content to the platform. Social media, as it stands, is pretty right-leaning, I think, in terms of what it offers people, the biases that it pushes people towards. And, what do we have then? Talk radio? That's far right. Talk radio is very far right. Print media, like news? Well, the New York Times, which is not left-leaning, is at most centrist, The Washington Post, stuff that's even remotely tethered to reality, are subscription-based. You go on their website and you hit a paywall. But you want to go in the Daily Wire, you want to go in the Post Millennial, you want to go to Fox.com, no paywall, get right in there. And Fox is known as much for its punditry as it is for its news, which is not the case for something like MSNBC, which is pretty, not entirely, but much more so news adjacent. So what do we have? Like, for left-leaning media distribution, podcasts, everything is skewed in their favor, and that's because of money, and that's, just a fundamental
Yeah.
limitation of the system.
I will give a shout out to the people at Democracy Now! For leaning as far left as you can be in this day and age. But they also receive money from the Ford Foundation, and that's what I find in a capitalist society is that ultimately if there's money behind it, then it is corporate, and then you don't by nature speak out against corporate interests when you're, living in a capitalist society.
Well, it definitely makes it hard to get funding. That's why for
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders to do well, he has to get like an unprecedented wave of grassroots funding with an average dollar amount of 27 or whatever. Whereas you can have people like Bloomberg just buy themselves into the race. I guess you could go the Trump way and just be so audacious that you get free media attention, but that would only work from the far right and from a former game show host. That wouldn't work for like... You've
iterated this a lot about the splintering off of the left. The left splinters very easily, while the demagoguery, like you say, on the right, and the groupthink is just unmatched.
Oh yeah, that can't be competed with. I don't think. It's just a innate advantage of their ideology. We have to compete in other ways.
I guess that's what scares me the most is the fact that they're way more well organized and willing to just mimic each other exactly, while we tend to be more individualistic and anti-authority, and then that hurts us in the end, where I'm arguing with like my fellow vegans over how vegan I really am. It's like, come on, dude, give me a fucking break here.
Yeah. I mean, some people see it as a sign of like authenticity within the left, but it's always been a huge detriment. Like historically, as far back as the left goes, even like politically. Our main hope right now is just some kind of like liberal hegemony, because leftism in this country isn't strong enough to meaningfully resist the far right. The most they could do is kind of inform liberals in doing so, prop them up, make their job a bit easier, or aid them in some fashion. But outside of that, I don't really know what can be done, especially since the liberals are not doing a great job on their own right now.
No, and then what they're representing doesn't really represent the left people. The people really want a socialist revolution. They want work reform and land reform and all these kind of reforms. But the status quo liberals and the liberals of power can't really provide that in any meaningful way. So my apathetic side of me says, hey, let's just let the fascists just have their turn and find out that it doesn't work and just fucking kill like millions of people with their shit. And then that's like the only way we're going to get over this. This is like totally apathetic and not a nice thing, but I'm hopeless in the sense that I'm like scared that the world has gone crazy and that there's a mass psychosis that we can't cure with logic.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, historically, these fascist waves do generally have to be burnt through. Though, I mean, in terms of like experientially, the issue is I don't know how much relationship there is between like the harm they cause and the likelihood of them collapsing down the run. Because the ultimately the notion you've described is like a liberal one, the idea that, well, surely people will wake up eventually to the horrors, right? The answer is like, no, if it weren't for external forces, Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany could have chugged along for a good while longer. Maybe they would have eventually had some kind of like internal power struggle, or their economy would have collapsed because they weren't very competently run. But that doesn't necessarily mean they would have like eschewed the Nazism or the imperial shit or whatever. They would have continued on in that fashion. So without relying on external support, it seems like there has to be some like internal mechanism for pushing through the wave of fascism, because I don't know if there's a point through that system where they would like give up or be rebuked by the citizenry.